enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really want
to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'd ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say, we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
WESN.
Hello there, Sean Michael Small, Talking Point, once again with you. A lot to get through. Hopefully later on we should have our disaster management expert. We'll continue some of the conversations from last week and include some of the happenings of late this week, and particularly in the last couple of days. Not entirely sure what you experienced with regards to the traffic yesterday. I've seen one video, but we'll have that discussion. Now, in the meantime, a couple of things just to mention. The Commissioner of Police, he has continued, I guess you could say, communicate with the public. This time now, there's some photos courtesy of the TTPS of him going through some of the files that were current and valid. They were forwarded to his office. Apparently, he has gone through them completely. And of course, we don't know who is making a part of that list, but this is part of his efforts to try to expedite firearms applications, as one headline puts it, and essentially, I guess you could say, to deal with a backlog per se, depending on how long your application has been in the pipe. Some of your documentation might not necessarily be current, but this, according to the Commissioner, it's part of a continued push for procedural clarity and public accountability. And this is one of those things where, in many ways, and I'm not saying this in a disparaging way, but it's almost like if here comes a new police commissioner who, to some extent, his experience would not suggest that he has political savvy, but then, on the other hand, it might, depending on how much of his job was engaging with international partners. And here he comes, and in some ways, with regard to the practical aspect of politics, not the bubble, not the back and forth with who accusing who about what, and then counter accusations in order to obfuscate the original accusations and so on and so on. No, here he comes rather like an effective politician, like a mini. Let me not say what I want to say because people might think I touted him too soon. That, again, we await to see the effect on crime. To some extent, the TTPS has had a reasonably good year. To what extent was that because of the state of emergency and everything else that happened at the beginning of the year, like Carnival? To what extent is that not necessarily just from the state of emergency, but the work that the police has been doing? The new vehicles, according to ASP Arun, has had somewhat of an impact on crime to help keep certain statistics down. So we have to wait and see. But how he's operating, the commissioner, with regards to a certain amount of upfront communication, with regards to a certain amount of effective communication, with regards to a certain amount of transparency in his communication, it is a breath of fresh air compared to the previous commissioner. Let me just say that off the jump. And he is doing, I think, somewhat of a better job than Junior Benjamin, although Junior Benjamin was in an acting interim type of position. So It is what it is, right? To some extent, maybe he might even be doing a better job than McDonald Jacobs, who I think is maybe a slightly unfairly judged too harshly. But we have to wait and see exactly, how the firearm user license situation will be managed on an ongoing basis as time goes on. Will it be fast enough? At some point, the backlog will be cleared. At some point, most people that want firearms will have them. And then, things would be easier. But until then, it's a hell of a thing to just tell people, well, you're going to have to wait because the line is long over a matter like this. Now, the Commissioner of Police responded to a situation that was reported in the news with regards to WASA's comments on silt dumping and refuse dumping from a quarry site, which is alleged to be illegal, and is alleged that that site's operator, an illegal site's operator, has ties to both political parties, the two larger, because there are now 3 political parties in Parliament, so I can't say that anymore, the 2 larger political parties in Parliament. And it does not necessarily say what was the result of, quote unquote, a targeted operation to assess the situation on the ground. So we have to wait and see, because to some extent now, is this the commissioner running into a situation that persisted because of potential political cover? And the report says ties to both the PNM and the UNC, so it's not like we're saying it's corruption that's one-sided. Now, there's also implications out of the Alan Warner's case, or his son's case, that to some extent, at least the previous administration, may or may not have crossed their T's and dot their I's when it came to all of the proper documentation of what otherwise would have been authorized work. That's the polite, generous way of saying it. And is this another situation of just governments of the day, because again, apparently he has ties to both political parties, allowed a certain amount of rule bypassing for expediency's sake and maybe laziness? In some ways, I know a lot of people want to complain about the ease of doing business. I won't be surprised that the government, because to some extent with regards to, I believe it was the $1 million payout to the victims' families over the Paria situation, then Prime Minister Stuart Young complained about the slow pace of how it takes to get it done, right, and the bureaucracy. So I won't be surprised if government entities have to put up with the same ease of doing business nonsense that the private sector does. And what will be even more ironic is if they do all kind of under-the-table things in order to bypass these things and grease the wheels to get it done, but not getting it done with regards to giving out some money and what have you, but rather throwing their weight around. Do you know who I am? That kind of nonsense. So is this quarry part of that, or is it just outright corruption and illegal operation? The report does not have, at least the one I have read, does not have a conclusion to that. We wait and see in the results. There was a police-involved shooting in the Southern Division. It's a funny story, and it's not funny because I think I'm mistrusting the events and the authorities are lying. It's a funny story in the sense of it might indicate something that we haven't seen before. I just don't know what. And that worries me just a little bit, because apparently there was reports of gunmen seen in an overgrown area along the Torib-Tabakit Road in New Grant, and the police responded to the scene. Once they got in proximity they observed 4 men of Hispanic descent standing along the roadway. The report says, so it is alleged, that upon seeing the officers approach them, the men ran, and one is alleged to have turned around, pointed a gun at the police, and opened fire. And the report says that the police returned fire, striking the suspect. He was later pronounced dead at the Princestown District Health Facility. So the real thing to me, because a lot of people might say, oh, do you believe that they just happened to find 4 people on the road and one of them just happened to turn around and shoot back? Yes, I believe that can happen. And unless I have a smoking gun to say otherwise, that's not the problem. The problem is, what exactly were they doing? And this is just one of those things where I'm concerned that this might be a sign of some kind of new criminal activity that we don't know about, and maybe or maybe not, it might be a prelude to violence. That's one of the things that we're hoping is not going to happen, that the violence is going to ramp back up. I see the trend starting, and I hope that it continues. I just don't have any reasonable expectations. I don't have anything that I could tell myself to convince myself that the violence should not re-escalate, because the escalating violence, it was a long-term trend. There was nothing necessarily forestalling it, and I don't have anything concrete to say, oh, that's what's going to keep it from happening again. So it's unreasonable to just assume that it won't. So I am stuck in this dilemma of hoping for the best, but unfortunately bracing if the worst happens. I don't even want to say I'm expecting the worst. There's reports, well, the government has said there's a new CPAP bill coming next week. I don't necessarily want to rehash into all of the who's right or who's wrong. Of course, the workers, they want to complain, they're threatening legal action. The government is saying that the CPAP situation needed to be, reorganized. CPAP hasn't had audited accounts for however long. One of the things is, and Keith Scotland calls them interlopers, which on one hand I could appreciate as somewhat true, but on the other hand, maybe he's going just a little teeny itty bit too far. The Lavender Outreach for Vertical Enrichment executive, trio, because that's, so I assume, I don't know who else is part of the messaging, are basically warning people to not protest the CPAP situation currently, and not to follow the PNM in its attempt to destabilize the government by fueling anger and protest. Now, on one hand, I can understand this argument, because I do think that the PNM needs to figure out how to be more effective without just having to be louder with more righteous indignation. Louder, fire and fury, righteous indignation. It's almost like if we don't actually know how to convince people about anything. It's like somehow when you go into meetings, you could have all kind of arguments and diplomacy and whatever, right? Know how to talk, be smooth, have grace, show some skill in your ability to utilize your command of the English language in order to try to convince somebody of something that you want them to do for you. When it comes to the population, it's almost like if they gave up. And now it's just fire and brimstone and the apocalypse and revelations. That's all we could draw from, because we need to appeal to what is perceived by us, rhetorically speaking, not by me, as the lowest common denominator. Or to put it another way, to borrow a phrase from some online political commentators from the UK and America and Canada, the bigotry of low expectations. Because not much is expected of you, so we need to spoon feed you like children. What we think is digestible morsels, just enough for you to go where we want you to go. Like a Pied Piper, taking all the kids out of the city. Well, we need to take you in the direction of our righteous indignation. You should have righteous indignation too. You should have fireballs coming out of your eyes and lightning bolts coming out of your, if you've watched Braveheart, you know the rest of that quote. Now, the flip side of that is, I think, ironically, because Lavender Outreach for Vertical Enrichment, they're not entirely wrong, but they're not entirely, in my opinion, right either. Because how could you tell people, hey, don't follow them, they're just wrong. Well, why are they wrong? What is the actual practical details in the CPAP matter to explain to the people why the PNM is necessarily wrong in this situation and why they should not support the stance? Because if you don't have practical reasoning behind you, whether you like the PNM or not, telling people just don't believe them, don't support them, that comes borderline on censorship, that comes borderline on fascism, that comes borderline on groupthink. It's basically saying, hey, they are the wrong people. Don't follow them. They don't conform to what is right. And what is right, all of a sudden, is not based on the merits of each individual situation. What is right is now based on identity. Their identity as the PNM makes them wrong. Granted, yes, to some extent, the PNM has that uphill battle to rehabilitate their image. But people on the outside now, that I would assume you want to come across as objective third parties, should not lean into, play into, prop up, and push further any sort of narrative that essentially will say, well, PNM is wrong because it's PNM. Not because they're wrong because their arguments might be bad. Not because they're wrong because their approach might be bad. But just because they are. Because then what will happen is the rest of the country will start to see the same thing about the UNC. And you will find, everybody will find ways to spin details in order to come up with seemingly justifiable arguments, quote unquote, that mostly will be centered in emotional manipulation and not in rational thinking and detailed arguments. Because, again, the flip side is Keith Scotland pushed back against them. He used certain phrases. He was surprised by what he described as Smith. I believe this is the head of Love, that is the Love Until Outreach group. Interloping in matters that did not concern him. Interloping seems to be the order of the day. If a person is aggrieved one day employed, the next day unemployed, at a time when SCA results are out, children are entering new schools, books and supplies are needed, they are concerned about their daily sustenance. The conversation should be about a way going forward. But do they want people to beg, to grovel? That will not happen in Port of Spain South. We did not discuss protests, but rather practical actions. I wonder on whose behest Smith and his group are singing, making unwanted, ill-timed, and unsolicited statements about lawful decisions. Because what is the PNM doing that is not lawful? And that's why I have an issue with it. But MP Scotland, just kind of be careful that you don't make similar mistakes in your counter-rebuttal. And all too often fault in our local politicians. But I've been going on about this too long, but essentially, just because you don't like it, as long as it's legal, this is the challenge of a free and open society, relatively speaking. We don't actually have free speech, we have freedom of expression, which I think is, for a country that does not have a king as its head, I think it's a little bit ridiculous. But anyway, you have to be willing to allow people to do their due, especially people who you disagree with and dislike. If you are superior, if your arguments are superior, you don't need to tell people, oh, don't follow them just because it's them. You could convince them not to follow them in the practicality and the merits of your argument, of the facts that you have on your side and your ability to frame them. All right. Running out of time, let's go straight into today's daily review. Caught them by surprise. All right, a couple of things to get through quick. One, I want to continue where I left off yesterday because I had essentially the same lower third with regards to transparency. There have been a lot of things in the last week that I observed and I had them grouped together, transparency and objectivity, because one of the things that went viral, I am not connected enough to always get what goes viral in Trinidad and Tobago social media, but one of the things that I did see that was sent to me was a clip of the government hiding behind standing orders, and not even necessarily like good standing orders to say, oh, well, I could see the logic and it's totally justifiable. Essentially, they were asked questions with regards to the firings of the WASA CEO and the Central Bank chairman. And both the Minister of Public Affairs and the Minister of Finance, they utilized, I believe, the same standing order 27(1)(g), a minister may decline to answer a question if, in his opinion, the publication of the answer would be contrary to the public interest. Now, the problem with that is, how do we determine that it is contrary to the public interest? And let me just cut straight to the crux of the matter. If the PNM did this, we'll be all over them. And this goes back to what I was just saying. Just because it's the government of the day, just because it's the UNC, yes, I know they have a mandate. Yes, I know they have popular support. That doesn't mean that everything that they do, automatically, we must assume it is good and just and right and proper and beneficial. Because this is the opposite of transparency. We're not talking about a national security thing. We're not talking about a high-profile court matter. We're talking about the CEO of WASA and the chairman of the central bank. Already situations where we would like to have more transparency. And with regards to the WASA situation, we already know that part of the government's agenda with WASA, as they campaigned, is political. Because they did not go into WASA, took the time, got the lay of the land, did fact-finding, and then made decisions. They went into WASA with a predetermined objective based on the relationship with the PSA. And now, at a time, and again, oh my gosh, but it's the UNC. Aren't they the good guys? This is not Hollywood, this is real life. You hold people accountable, otherwise, even good people go astray. At a time when the UNC is making great pains about, oh, look at these appointments, all these appointments that are happening, all of these appointments that happened, all of these hand-picked people. The central bank governor, they fired him. They fired him and he sued and he won. The PNM fired him. So now, to prove that we're better, we are not going to do something different. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to fire the chairman of the central bank and replace him with our hand-picked person, because it's us, our hand-picked person is better. It's better, it's more moral and right and just and true, because when we do it, it's moral and right and just and true, because everybody wants to cheerlead for the government. And listen, I don't want the government to fail. I'm not saying that the person that they select to chair the central bank is going to be a bad person. And I'm not saying that the person that they removed was a great governor. Sorry, not chairman, governor. It's governor, right? But I am saying is this, the process that they did to do it probably was not the best one, and it leaves too many questions, because especially in this case, the opposition ain't asking anything phenomenal. This is basic, obvious questions. If the opposition didn't ask it, the media should be asking it. These are low-hanging fruit questions that you can't even face. And dare I say, look at which ministers are running from the basic, simple questions. I wonder why. It's not a good look. Now the former central bank governor is looking to sue for wrongful dismission. Precedent is set. I don't know if he's right or not in this case. I actually disagreed with the central bank governor with how he was conducting things. It's just that all of my perceptions that the central bank governor was not handling the situation properly, first of all, it does not justify what was done. Similar to earlier. There are times when it doesn't matter how bad the person is acting. You can't just do things in a however you want to do it way and expect everybody to conform. I am not a lemming. I am not a sheep. I will not just accept things and tolerate things. That's what the country was doing for quite a few years in the PNM, and we saw how that turned out. I am not going to assume moral superiority of one side over another just because they're not the other side. So let's see how this, and look, it might end up, maybe he'll lose the lawsuit. If he wins, that'll just make it look worse. But if he loses the lawsuit, it still doesn't mean that we had good best practice with regard to transparency and accountability in this place, in this circumstance. And you need to call it out from the beginning, not wait until it reached the point of no return, and then you're like, how did it get here? I thought Dr. Rowley was a good guy. I thought Stuart Young knew what he was doing. Do you want it to get to that point again? I have faith in Kamala Persad-Bissessar, but let's not forget the partnership did not sustain itself. It did not endure. And I want the government to avoid those pitfalls and mistakes. But from the way I see it, members of the administration are trying desperately to race with the PNM on the way to the bottom. Who could get lower first? They might not realize that's what they're doing, but hey. Then there's a situation in Tobago, a $19 million villa that apparently was in the initial stages of being purchased by the Tobago Regional Health Authority, and then sometime later it was reported, or it was already purchased some time ago, which leads to a lot of questions, and I'll go straight to the minority leader. He basically asked, oh, I'm trying to find, at a time when the THA, this is the quote, at a time when our hospitals are starved for basic equipment, patients struggle to access life-saving medicine, and healthcare workers operate with limited resources, one must ask, is this the most prudent use of funds? So on one hand, the process, we went from, the reporting process was, we've started looking into it, and it jumped all the way with regards to public communication to it's already completed, we already bought it. Then there's a whole situation with another public entity that is holding money in trust to facilitate the purchase, but they weren't utilized, and now they want the money back, but I don't know if they're going to get the money back. So the transparency on the situation is kind of lost because, you know, they did the actual purchase without telling anybody, and that's maybe not that bad. But then what the minority leader says, I think, is a relevant question. Did you need to buy a villa? The Regional Health Authority of Tobago needs to buy a villa. And I thought maybe it was like more like a hotel that had numerous units and you could convert it into wards and stuff. But no, it just looks like a house. Doesn't even necessarily look like that big of a house per se. I don't know if this is the most cost-effective way of doing things, but hey, it is what it is. There's a lot of questions there. Unfortunately, the THA is going to be caught up more, I think, with regards to the general perception of transparency in the country. And this is the thing that the UNC needs to understand, and I didn't say it outright yesterday, but I was pointing towards it yesterday. They have to deal with the fallout of the PNM's lack of transparency. The public perception on transparency in the country didn't just reset. We're not just saying, oh, now everything is just automatically transparent just because of the change in government. No, we actually have to see transparency. That's what the Commissioner of Police is doing. He's showing us in how he's practicing that he is potentially better than his predecessor. But in this case, some ministers want to show, they want to say they're better than their predecessors, but what they're showing us is not exactly that. On the flip side of that, there is one minister, Dominic Smith, he's pointing to a $60 million upgrade project in the Ministry of Public Administration that apparently has been ongoing for the last 24 years. Now, the unfortunate part of that is that includes the time of the partnership. But to some extent, I've already said this week, I'm separating partnership from Kamala Persad-Bissessar at least to some degree, and this cabinet from that cabinet to a significant degree. It's not the same administration, but it is what it is. Meanwhile, you could say most of those 24 years was PNM. I think it was something like 19. 19 of those 24 years were PNM, right? 9 under Manning, 8 to 9 under Manning, and then the last 9 to 10 under Dr. Rowley, Stuart Young. And I really don't know. This is a new level of where's the accountability if it's taking that long to do one upgrade. I know depending on what you're trying to upgrade, government procurement around the world is not always the fastest thing. But first of all, our system should not be that technically embedded because we are still transitioning to digital systems from pencil to paper. So it's not like we have to overhaul IT infrastructure to upgrade to new systems on that level. At least that's what I think. Maybe I'm wrong. But 24 years, you need to be building the mother of all AI data management systems. What are you building? What are you upgrading? I don't know. Where's the accountability and transparency in that? there's a lot of implications with regards to where those 60 million US dollars went. This is Minister Dominic Smith, Public Administration, Minister of Public Administration. So he's sounding the alarm bells on that, right? Okay, so the project apparently has been going on for over 24 years, but the 60 million, sorry, I didn't actually register this detail, and I'll end this story with this. The 60 million was meant to be spent over a 4-year period to end in 2026, which means before 2022, what was this project? What was this project, financially speaking, going on? What was it? I have no idea. All right. Running through the next 2 stories real quick. First of all, there's the whole thing with the TTRA. I've been saying it, right? Of course, the Minister of Labor is basically pointing out that the Revenue Authority is not necessary for tax collection. Yes, that might be true. Here's the thing. What is the alternative to try to improve the situation? Because what do we say? Well, public sector has issues, and arbitrarily saying we're going to improve customs and Board of Inland Revenue. But the public sector has issues. So unless you're going to do public sector reform, I don't know if you're even going to be able to practically sell me that you could fix the problems with customs and BIR. Maybe they can, but you need to explain how you're going to do it, at least in the long run, maybe not right away. Meanwhile, a PNM senator is basically saying the TTRA repeal fueled by the need to score political points, which to some extent, because this was a predetermined course of action. And again, I'm not contrasting that to anything that the PNM did or didn't do. I'm contrasting that with regards to how the UNC has operated in other areas of governance once they took over office. And the difference, in my opinion, is so striking at a basic level, I don't know why no one else is asking that particular question. I'm not going to assume that it's fine, because the PSA is hailing that the TTRA, the appeal, is a victory for workers. But again, look, this is going on at the same time as the CPEP firings. So is it that it's a victory for workers, or it's a victory for the PSA members? Because the PSA members, I guess, don't include CPEP workers. So out of sight, out of mind. What? Nothing to see here. That doesn't concern me. Moving on. Finally, let's go to the third story very quick. Tren de Aragua has been declared a terrorist organization. The one big point that I want to bring up with this, listed as a terrorist organization, TNT, apparently it's done with regards to the international necessities, right? So we are in conformity with other things. This is done via the High Court. The designation was granted by the High Court. Now, here's the thing. So because of this, it makes it illegal. It makes it illegal. I want to get the... All dealings with Tren de Aragua are now illegal. Any money, property, or assets linked to the group must be frozen. Providing financial or other support to the organization is now a criminal offense in Trinidad and Tobago. Here's my thing, though. Isn't it already illegal to be in a gang? So one would hope that, since it's illegal to be in a gang, one would hope that our anti-gang legislation, which already has proven to be ineffective, but let's just go with it, right? One would hope that it should then potentially, because it's illegal to be in a gang, therefore potentially it should be illegal for a gang to exist. Therefore potentially it should be illegal to have any dealings with said gang, to provide any money, property, or assets linked to said gang, and to provide financial or other support to said gang. So I don't necessarily know why it has to be a terrorist organization for these things to happen. Unless you say the anti-gang legislation is completely, is completely a waste of time. And now we're going to have to use different legislation for a different purpose. Yes, I understand to some extent some of the dealings are borderline terrorism because it touches on the political sphere. But I'm still not comfortable mixing the waters like that, because when you do that, all of a sudden you get things like having, you know, the head of a religious body being hit with sedition charges, because it's a stretch, but it's not an unreasonable stretch. That's where that kind of philosophical, let's use this other legislation to come in and deal with a problem that the actual legislation that's supposed to deal with it can't work, right? Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll welcome our guests. Stay tuned.
There are limitations in all the healthcare sectors,
Correct.
not just this country,
Yes.
where the numbers will surpass the amount of doctors and nurses to provide that quality care. We're talking about holding a patient's hand, giving them the support, the emotional support that they need, advice. That gap, you are providing that pivotal gap, so that really makes you stand out from all other NGOs as far as my experience goes.
Yes, I actually go into the homes also of the patient.
Feeling drained? Struggling to keep up? It's time to take control of your wellness. On this episode of Wellness Unlocked, we're diving into the key nutrients your body needs for all-day energy and balance, with 100% or more of your daily essential vitamins, plus added chromium to support healthy blood sugar. This is complete wellness in a single soft gel. Join us as we uncover how small changes can make a big impact on your health. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and take the first step toward better health.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore Color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore Color.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience.
Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Welcome back to Talking About, ladies and gentlemen. Sean Michael Small, joined by disaster management expert Ashraf Ali, and we're here to continue conversation about the eye in the sky that don't lie and the benefits of having the monitoring, right? I just borrowed a sports phrase, right? Okay. Because a couple things happen. One, and when I say eye in the sky, I don't just mean a high up eye, but also CCTV cameras that could be on lampposts, street corners, what have you, right? Now, there's a negative aspect with regards to the invasiveness of monitoring, but there are benefits of monitoring public spaces. And there are a couple of things, I think, a couple of examples that you sent me that I think actually appears in the discussion, but then it's beyond that. But first of all, welcome back.
Well,
Ashraf.
Yeah, welcome. Thanks for having me again here. Good thing it wasn't yesterday because that traffic would have been a disaster.
No, that's one of the things I wanted to ask you. First of all, I tried finding news reports on it, and I didn't see any. So I'm like, that's interesting. Now, maybe I just missed them, right? But you did send me a video, so I saw the non-moving traffic. And this is not something that's the norm. When the traffic is so non-moving that people got out of their car just to stand around.
You see, there was some kickback against the traffic management by law enforcement and how they manage it. I could understand the feelings of the individuals, because a lot of persons would have been sitting in traffic for a long period of time with no proper information as to what to do, where to go, and how to traverse. That is a sad point about it in that aspect of it. So when you're managing major incidents or major events or major situations like these, communication is an important aspect of it.
I feel though, because I said this yesterday, the government made a decision and told the teachers, hey, what? You all have exams? That's nice. You all figure it out. That's a you problem. That's not a we problem, right? Which I didn't necessarily appreciate. I'm like, if you all wanted to do a thing that's going to disrupt society, advise society, especially since it's so, last minute, relatively speaking, how to treat with it. And I think with regards to the traffic management, a part of me is like, I can see the TTPS being like, you want us to do what?
It was really honest.
How do you want us to do this?
However, let's be realistic. The visit of the Prime Minister of India didn't happen overnight. There would have been conversations, there would have been an itinerary presented, there would have been knowledge in advance that this event would have been taking place. There would have pre-planning taken place with respect to how. So when I'm saying advance, it may not be a whole month in advance. It might be a short window. You might have because the Prime Minister of India may decide on having his own agenda, and it wouldn't coincide with the plans of Trinidad and Tobago, right? So you may get a short window. But even in a short window, with the amount of experience we have entertaining and accepting foreign dignitaries of different classes, we should have been in a better position.
But I mean, we have not a dignitary on this level since Obama came in, right?
And even with Obama, it was not as difficult.
I feel as though, well, first of all,
it was not as bad.
When you, just on a personal level, when you follow their media appearances on an individual level, right? When he and his wife went in, they do talk about the times when, we wanted to do this, we wanted to do that, but then, and I think this is like a common trope almost, at least for those who are reasonable, right, in high office. The Secret Service will tell us how many cars they need, all kind of disruption to the public. Just if I want to get a cheeseburger in McDonald's, so it's like, well, all right, forget about that. I'll just have to get it from, and just so you know, they were charged for everything that they ate, huh? So if they wanted to go and pay for a cheeseburger at McDonald's and get the cheaper option as a normal person, that's a very normal thing to do. But because of their position, they knew better, right? And I don't know if Prime Minister Modi has that same experience.
This entire would be an entire package. When I say package, security arrangement package for him to move where he has to go, with the itinerary to go everything else. I'm not saying that it was done poorly. From my experience dealing with events of this nature, they would have some security protocols. However, the way it was presented that it was causing too much problems and all of that, I mean, there is some inconvenience that has to be accepted. Blocking off of the entire highway is part and parcel of an arrangement of that nature. What may have been the challenge for many persons is the time frame and the information that is being sent to the public domain as to where alternatives are.
When was the highway blocked off? That's the one thing that I'm not sure.
I'm not too sure. I didn't hear about any specific. I didn't hear about it, so it may have been mentioned in the media, but I didn't hear about it. But when you see that around end of business hours,
that's when
then a lot of persons were in serious problems because they could not have used alternate routes, and I'm saying that they should have been presented with some options.
So one of the things, because the eye in the sky, right, with regards to drones, helicopters if we had them, but okay, we can't afford that. Part of the management of the situation, because it seemed as though the first step would have been to put out enough public notices to flood media, right? Social media, TV, radio, what have you, with notices. Hey, these roads are going to be closed, and be very specific, and don't just, because I think I saw one of the notices, and of course you use the official name or whatever, but to some extent, you kind of need to break it down and spell it out for people in as simple as possible and to be as clear as possible. Hey, these hours, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. But because it seemed like that didn't happen enough, all right, now you're in a position where you have all this gridlock. If you need to adjust, if you need to make adjustments, having a bird's eye view of the situation is probably much better than trying to figure out, okay, send officers through the traffic here, there, and everywhere to try to report what's going on, and then we'll try and sort it out somehow.
It wasn't like that because there were officers at different intersections, different points. The challenge that they would be facing is that they were specifically there for a reason, which is to ensure that nobody encroaches on or enters the lock-off areas. The challenge is not that. The challenge is what about the general public who is not involved in that activity or is trying to get the way home after long. So
what I'm saying is, if you have a bird's eye view, you could then see in real time. All right, this is where all the cars are piled up. What are the potential off routes that we could direct them to?
That is where the CCTV network in our country needs to that, and the management of it is very important. So, because of what happened yesterday, let's take away yesterday's event from a normal day, which is worse off than yesterday, because at least we had one lane clear. Everybody is. When you have two lanes clear and there's there's gridlock traffic from one end to from the west all the way up to the south, what do? There's no alternative routes for persons to go anywhere. Now, the event was taking place in Couva. The irony is there's only one way that you can have, two avenues you can use: Solomon Hochar Highway and the Southern Main Road. All the traffic can't fit on the Southern Main Road, or it can be now. Persons were willing to get to the Southern Main Road and take that, but there was no option for them to reach the Southern Main Road. That is where you have to consider that how are you going to be able to get the vehicles or get the traffic to an area to alleviate some of the challenges.
How realistic would it have been maybe to try and figure out strategic spots to put police officers to in advance start kind of directing traffic like further down the line? Hey, don't go up here, via away from that, maybe to help communicate and to direct people. Hey, don't all just try and make it through, because you're not.
It's not far-fetched. It's realistic. It's something that should have been done more effectively. And I'm saying it didn't happen. But when you look at the amount of areas that needed to be managed, yes, it caused some problems yesterday with respect to blocking off an entire highway. That means that there's a route that no one could use anymore.
I know in the States there's an emergency broadcast protocol where basically, I could be wrong, but the government technically owns the airtime. And they could, at times they request, hey, we have a press conference for an emergency. At times they demand, hey, you will suspend your normal programming for us to put out this emergency broadcast. Now, with regards to motorists, the main form of medium would be the radio. Of course, we have a lot of radio stations, so you can't just say, oh, we'll hit one. You have to hit all of them. Yeah. Is there any provision for the government to tell the radio stations, hey, right now, for the next maybe hour, let's just say.
This is not a responsibility for the government. Let's make it clear. It's not a government responsibility. It's the persons who are responsible for security and traffic management.
But to some extent...
So I hear, but I don't want to say it's a government responsibility to treat it. The government needs to may coordinate how the messaging goes out through the different mediums.
The problem with that is the assumption is that traffic management will have a solution. Because one of my questions is, hey, look, Moody is a big deal, right? And we have more cars potentially than we did when Obama was here,
exactly.
right? So part of the reason why it was easier then was maybe the situation was easier to manage, relatively speaking, right? Part of it could have been the activities that Obama chose to do and the heads of state, because it wasn't just him alone at that time. And also part of it could have been that the public was a bit more aware, hey, they have a lot of big shots in Port of Spain. Maybe you need to like not look to do certain things for a couple of days, right? Whereas with Moody, we didn't have quite the same advance warning. But regardless, I do think that it is not unreasonable that, look, based on what the itinerary was, based on the security requirements, because the last thing we want is anything to happen to Moody. Right? With that said, there's a world where the TTPS and whoever's in charge of traffic management, there was no like great solution. There was maybe a variety of bad choices with less than desirable outcomes, and they're just trying to figure out what's the least bad.
And then,
then if the government's involved, you have more tools because they potentially could do certain things that the police can't do.
Exactly. So when I say the government, I don't want anybody get
there was a cabinet minister controlling things behind the scenes.
Represented with respect to that. The government has their role to play through security, the security aspect of it. There's a protocol aspect of it. There's all a different aspect of it behind the scenes with respect to that. Security arrangements for dignitaries visiting presidents, prime ministers, that falls under the umbrella of Ministry of National Security. Under that umbrella, now we have the Ministry of Justice. So they will have Ministry of Justice and
National Defense, Homeland Security.
So they will fall under that. So it's a collaborative effort to put arrangements in place for this.
I now just had a thought. Could it be that when they split the ministry into two?
I don't know. That would not have caused any. I think that the
just on a report. No. Okay.
Listen. I think that the amount of experience that is existing in both areas. This is nothing new for us.
Yeah.
This would have been nothing new for the national security apparatus to treat with, right? We had managed multiple ministers at the same time and prime ministers at the same time, not one. Right. So the only thing I'm saying is that there are resources that would have been available, and I think the communication and how they communicate the information to the general public was a bit lacking. They didn't consider the time frame that our large volume of persons normally go on the streets. That is what the critical time that the entire highway, the highways,
it's not just school children.
And school children finish work and finish school early. But finishing school early does not mean transportation stops.
Yeah, the parents are still working.
Parents are still working, and parents still have to find a way to get to their children. Children is also using public transportation to reach home, as well as all the business people and everybody else, businesses and persons who are working, trying to reach home.
So one of the things with a CCTV system or drone system would be, well, first of all, with the traffic yesterday, even if you're not necessarily using it to manage the traffic, in the moment, right? It's still allowing you to say, okay, in the debrief, in the after action report, you could have a record of, well, where the traffic was. You have video. Okay, this is what it looked like here. This is what it looked like there. And CCTV cameras could do that as well, depending if it's expansive enough. I'm not necessarily going to rehash the debate of CCTV over drones, but the point is to have the monitoring. So then, you know, after the fact, you could look at it and not just hope that you have reports to fill in all the blanks on where the traffic was and how bad it was and how the flows happened, but you could actually have recordings to see how it happened.
Yes.
And then it could help inform, okay, moving forward, what could we change, what could we do differently? And that same sort of procedure and method could then apply to day-to-day traffic management as well.
Exactly, and that is why CCTV networks are so important, not for crime fighting alone, for the everyday functioning of society in terms of productivity, because of you want to increase productivity and you want persons to reach on their workplace faster, earlier than they're supposed to or within the time frame, because it's productivity talking about. You don't want to lose a lot of man hours. Then you have incidents taking place on the roadways, so you want a quick response to alleviate some of those challenges. So CCTV does in fact play a critical role with respect to that. In when we had the visit of President Obama, former President Obama, we had...
Technically, they still call President Obama.
President Obama.
Yeah.
He, at that point in time, we had the use of the helicopters.
Ah, right.
So that gave the proverbial eye in the sky opportunity or over Skywatch, so you could have been able to monitor from that perspective. We don't have that amount of usage anymore. May have been limited. So yes, drones may have been a very good opportunity now for this situation, could have been utilized for this situation, as well as the CCTV networks, how it interact with each other. All of that might be good enough, and all of that is good. However, how you communicate information to the public and how you give the public information on a timely manner, and what you give the public is very critical in managing events of this nature.
I will say this, in this case, UAVs, one of the callers made that distinction. I'm not entirely sure how much a distinction is actually on a technical level, but UAVs that could stay airborne for longer than an hour in situations like this is where national security having those assets might be, you know, valuable, right? Not just a drone that could go up and respond to an incident within 40 minutes.
I just want to make it clear that persons made some, I listened to some persons on some social media platforms and some of the TV, radio stations, and they made statements with an uninformed manner.
On what?
On why this amount of security for this individual. Who is he? I don't know where they're getting the information from, Sean, but any visiting prime minister, any visiting prime minister, the special branch, right, has to produce a security threat assessment on that individual that determines the level of security arrangements and apparatus to put in place for that visiting individual.
And here's the thing.
And it is, and also, just to make it clear, it is not fixed. It is always being updated while that individual is on our soil.
So let's compare. Let's say Mia Mottley visits. What's the potential threat risks to Mia Mottley? Her political opponents? What about all of the countries that her military might be at odds with currently? Now let's look at the Prime Minister of India. Oh, he has countries that his nation's military is at odds with currently. That's called Pakistan and China, right? Those ain't small countries either. Those both are nuclear powers. That's point number one. Point number two is the Prime Minister of 1.7 billion people. And his political opponents, let's just say, they're of a larger scale than the political opponent of any regional neighbor. And that comes with more complications. I was talking about a friend of mine, and we basically are thinking, okay, who else would be on that level as a world leader? And Moody is kind of like top 6, top three, like when you combine the kind of geopolitics, strategic importance of his nation, right? The defense industry of his nation, the GDP of his nation and the population size of his nation, the actual, not just the strategic importance of his nation and their position, but then the actual who they're engaged with in active or semi-active or cold hostilities, right? It's like, if the Prime Minister of Grenada visited, that's not the same thing. And then on top of that, part of the reason why you have to have that security effort is, think about it. We lament when our local gangsters decide to spray and pray into a crowd and they don't care who they kill. Now imagine if some effort to attack Moody, he might survive, but what about our population that's in vicinity? If it gets out of control. So you have a show of force in part to ensure that it does not get out of control.
And it may appear to some it's an overkill, but let me tell you something and make it, there is no way that you would like an incident
to happen on your soil.
To happen not on what you soil, under our watch, where a visiting Prime Minister, it doesn't matter what level of security that we threat assessment they are placed under, right? If that speaks volumes.
It won't just reflect negatively about us to India, to the rest of the world.
Volumes across the board, across the world, as to our ability to secure ministers, prime ministers, and persons of a particular
I think
protocol on the protocol list, because we may not have any more visitors.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing.
This is sad.
People might say, well, I don't care if some random prime minister of a country visits. No, you need to understand. We see the details on how our crime works, and we know that it's not as bad as people on the outside might think. But people on the outside that sees the Prime Minister of India might have gotten attacked or worse yet killed, they're not thinking, oh, well, something like that's not going to happen to something like me. They're thinking, oh, that place is not safe.
Exactly.
Right? Because that's what we do. Think about it. We judge other countries by making with limited information, we make assumptions on their situation. But when foreigners do it to us on YouTube or whatever, we're like, how they could say that? How they could say that? But we do it. So why? Let's not be naive and think that, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. No, it is that big of a deal.
And I want to say, I might be biased.
I just want to say, Kennedy thought that, I want to see the wind on my face. It's not that big of a deal. That's what Kennedy thought. And literally, a decision made for one motorcade, and that was the end of that. Right?
So I want to say it, and I might be biased, so I will keep this as, so I accept my biases right now. Yesterday was a good day for the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and National Security. The individual, the president arrived. We had a successful first day. Today is day 2 of the visit. And we did well on the first day, right? We did well on the first day, and I hope the rest of the days go as well as the first day.
I have a semi-tough question. Have you seen the Tobago airport? Have you seen where the gates are in the Tobago airport?
Yes, I did.
Now imagine if the Prime Minister of India's plane landed in that airport. How much stress if you were in command?
I have a lot of stress.
Right, where those gates are, assuming they use the gates.
Yes.
And if they don't use the gates, that means he's going to basically take one of those rolling staircases, and which some world leaders do. You see the American president do all the time with Air Force One, right? That's what he does, right? But essentially, how much more stressed would you be to think of a foreign prime minister leaving his plane in the open?
I don't want him to think I'm more stressed about that.
Okay, now let's move on a little bit. Same thing though, because I thought you also shared with me something that went viral. The video did, not necessarily the audio that you shared. Allegedly, a police officer assaulted another driver, another motorist,
which is
and a third-party motorist managed to capture it. And why I think it's pertinent to this discussion is if we had a CCTV network, then we're not dependent on third-party citizens to do something which technically, and I'm very nervous about this, but if a third-party citizen does it, now they're at risk because, of course, it's their footage, and can they face reprisals? if it's a state system monitoring, and this is not some residential road, I think,
it's on
right?
the highway.
It's a highway.
It's on the highway.
Right? It's a major thoroughfare. So to have footage on that, right? So then now we don't need the generosity or the benevolence of strangers to ensure that these things don't go unnoticed.
Exactly, and the reason for that, the reason why I highlight that, as we were discussing CCTV network, if that matter should reach anywhere, and I hope it reached somewhere. Right. The footage already on social media, it cannot be used as evidence. But national security CCTV footage can be used as evidence.
Is it because is it because it might seem to be tainted being on social media, or the source in and of itself?
So you have to look for the source, because there's a procedure in law how to tender CCTV footage, national CCTV footage, as well as CCTV footage from any crime business place, private entity, as well as your phone. There's a procedure to tender it into court to present it as evidence. There are some intricacies with respect to that, but it's much easier for national CCTV as opposed to private CCTV, as well as your personal phone footage and all of that.
Yeah.
So that's why CCTV is important with respect to that. That situation just presents, or compounds, I should say, the level of road rage that we have, and how very easy someone can get themselves in problems.
This is why everyone is like, guns for all. I'm like, people gonna have it in a car the way how we drive. Now maybe it might convince people I need to actually be more careful when I drive, because you never know who might pull a gun on me if I bad drive them, right?
Information, from what I'm getting on some social media platforms, that it is alleged that the person is a police officer.
Yeah, we don't know how true it is. He wasn't in uniform or anything like that.
Whether but I am simply saying that if he's a police officer, that is absolutely unprofessional conduct, right? I do not think that whatever the individual would have done would have warranted such an action, where person would have come out of the vehicle and assaulted the individual in that manner. That is a question, that is a discussion, that is first an investigation, and I hope that the driver who was assaulted would have made a report. Right? I hope that he would have made a report.
Regardless of a police officer or not.
Police officer or not, because the person was assaulted. But it just simply shows that the level of road rage that we have, and I do not want anybody to believe that you can make excuses of stressful work environment. You don't know what the person might be going through during the day, or that does not, all those excuses does not give you the right to assault another individual because you're going through a bad day. Road rage is road rage, and assault is assault. Anytime you start to make excuses why persons commit offenses, society has gone. Because you're making an excuse why I should commit an offense.
Yeah.
Right? And right now we do that. We make excuses. Well, we have too much traffic, so I had to take a little chance here, and I had to take a little chance here. Well, I robbed the place because he couldn't eat. He had no food to get. Right?
Or I had to pay the public servant another time because my form was taking too long to get processed.
Right. So you make excuses why certain things, that you do certain type of crime. There are certain minor crimes or minor offenses that might be, and I just want to be very cautious, might be a bit acceptable because it does not impact the greater society and it does not cause a serious problem. But there's no excuse for committing a robbery.
See, I think the problem is, what you just said there is very subjective, and the problem is the people who commit it, they want to act as though they are within an objective boundary, right? It's fine. I'm entitled to this because it's fine. It's like, no, you can get grace if the police decides that what you're doing is impacting. Because it's one thing to get a parking ticket because you shouldn't park there, but it's at a certain hour when there's nobody around and there's no traffic and there's nothing going on and you're literally banging nobody. But then now, if it's in the middle of the working day in Port of Spain.
As you mentioned the word parking and tickets, the irony is that during the incident yesterday and they visit.
Or when they, yeah.
Do you know that persons who chose an opportunity to probably traverse the priority bus route or cut across the bus route to get to another location, they were ticketed.
Okay, yeah. I thought you were going to say if you got out of your car while traffic was at a standstill, you're technically parked in the middle of the highway. So I don't, and that might be an example of what the police are like, while we understand. But you can't just feel, oh, well, I can park in the middle of the highway whenever. But yes, with the priority bus routes, yeah. In fact, this is crazy because, to be fair to the government, right, because I criticized the government a lot this morning, but to be fair to them, when the Prime Minister said, hey, we accent the bus route passes and we cleaning that up, didn't the public say, hooray? So at that point, you need to understand, you can't just willy-nilly the rules of the bus route, whatever you feel like it.
But that is where there is inconsistencies that makes us look, law enforcement
This is
look
why
bad.
What you said there, the subjective part of it.
Exactly.
It's fine to have a little bit of it, especially when the consequences and the scale is not so bad. But once society reaches a certain scale, now those little things become more frequent, and it becomes too frequent, and then it's better to just have an objective no.
Right. So nobody could have used the shoulder on the eastbound lane because so much police officers on it. But why not use the shoulder why not make 4 lanes?
Right.
Why not?
I mean, the roadways in Shogunas, we basically did that, right?
I'm saying, yes, this is a unique situation that requires flexibility and the ability, because what you want is you don't want to keep everybody on the highways.
I think the flip side to that, ironically, I'm going to be telling you this. Emergency services, to get access, might need the shoulder.
That is why they keep a whole lane open for emergency services.
They had a lane open already?
Yeah,
oh, well.
they had the whole highway is for emergency vehicles and authorized vehicles to go on.
Oh, you mean the one that was blocked off?
Yeah,
right, of course, yes.
So you have to use practical, be more practical. Any opportunity, and I'm not saying that, yes, you have the objectivity from one side, but then you have to look at what the risk associated with having the entire highway gridlocked. And persons are going, there's the possibility of...
In the afternoon sun?
Yes. Also...
In July?
Along the Beetham Highway, where we expect that we normally have grabbing and snatching and all kinds of things.
Oh.
So there's a possibility of those things still happening, and there's a risk for that happening because...
No, but imagine I am a not young citizen, not planning to be stuck in traffic, don't have access to water, might not have one of those vendors conveniently located nearby, might not have money to buy it if I did. And, sometimes heat in this country is bad. Am I going to just have my AC running in standstill traffic that I don't know where it's going to end?
Must always, so that is why I'm saying, when you're planning for these events, you cannot be only interested in one aspect of it or concentrating on one. There's another aspect of it where how it impacts the public.
That's another thing. If there's a medical emergency in the middle of something like this, and I have an eye in the sky, or I have CCTV, now there's a direct avenue where the public could be, it doesn't have to be the person in distress, but just anybody around them could know, well, if I wave my hands, or put up a sign or something,
may have
somebody could see me, as opposed to we're stuck in traffic, the nearest police officer, I can see the blue lights yonder that way. It's going to probably take me like 20 minutes just to run there, right? I'm not going to be able to shout over the din of everything that's going on and anywhere close, at this distance. So how are we going to help this person and I need help now?
So there's a lot of benefit from CCTV, not only for managing of or looking for evidence for crime, but for the everyday function. The same way you have CCTV where you can, if someone is injured, someone is in distress, you can get response to them, right? For traffic management and a lot of different areas.
Now there's an aspect of this that you impressed upon me, which I somewhat knew that's true. You could have the cameras, but then you need the actual people behind the cameras now.
You need the infrastructure and the manpower resources to achieve this objective.
Because someone has to be monitoring these things. You need to have the procedures on when these things happen, what you do, proper workflows, chain of command, communication channels, etc., etc.
It's a vast network of resources, and like everything else, resources, they always talk about resources limited. But if you want to use this type of technology, you have to put down the infrastructure, have to put and invest into the resources
to
achieve the objectives.
This is why I prefer drones over our expansive camera system. But regardless of which one is done, I have already said, look, if we have to sacrifice, maybe right now sacrificing for security might be better. And people might think, oh, well, crime is down. We don't need to spend more on security, right? Because, look, I mean, to be fair, the TTPS has reduced, at least, I can't remember, one of the months it was 30-something murders, which on average is low compared to the average of the last like 3 to 4 years. That is low, and I think we might actually, that might be the new average in the last 2 to 3 months, right?
Yes.
So when I say average, I mean average by month, right? So some people, you know, you make the mistake, and they made this mistake in Oakland, and Oakland is a case study of what not to do to follow up success, because they literally just, and I've said it before, they reversed their fortunes from record lows to record highs, and they have a major issue now with crime. Just because it looks good doesn't mean we shouldn't invest in it, because investing in it could compound, cement, and follow up the success to ensure that it is maintained, right?
You have to maintenance. So you have to keep those systems. Whatever is working good, you continue and you improve on it. And whatever is not working good, you revisit to see what additional changes you have and to benefit. Because it's a trial and error, right? Because the same way crime changes, it morphs into something different. It counters what law enforcement is looking to do. So criminals do, in fact, sit and discuss and plan how to mitigate against what law enforcement is putting in place. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no criminal coming out during the crosser yesterday because because they expect a high presence of police and law enforcement personnel in and around the area. The risk for them getting caught and the risk of them getting away, right? Not caught, the risk of getting away is greater. There's a possibility of them being arrested and not achieving the objective.
That's the other thing. You have a strong security presence because you want local crime to understand now's not the time to do your nonsense. Because the last thing you want is, you know, what we saw, I think it was the English football team or English cricket team. They're in Hyatt and some murder goes on in the breakfast shed. The last thing you want is Moody to be like that. And then it's like, right next to him, there's like some incident where with some idiot with an AK sprayed on somebody else, and who knows, maybe while Moody's motorcade is passing. But regardless, you don't want those things to happen because you run the risk of the local crime spilling over into your international incident, making an actual incident. But there was another thing. Oh gosh, I had 2 points and now I lost it. Of course, the phone lines are open, so you could call in closer. Do we have your say? Continue the conversation. What did you make of the whole Moody visit and the traffic? Were you caught in the traffic? Let us know. Maybe you were caught in the traffic, but you understand and you appreciate how the police handled the situation. You got good customer service interaction. Let us know. You could call in and have your say. But with regards to this situation, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember. I had a point that I wanted to make.
In which context?
What was the last thing that you were talking about just now?
Traffic management. The one before.
Gangs. It was gangs.
Oh well, I saw you was talking about gangs. I wonder if it's gangs you're talking about. Crime happening while.
Well, we were talking about crime statistics. We were talking about maintaining. I wanted to ask you. This is what I want to ask you. Because the theory would be, of course, if crime is down, the economy would have a better chance of flourishing. Now, from your experience, right, it might not be the totality of policing, but from your experience, you know, and the responses you may have fielded from the business community, how much could you say, you know, generalization, estimate, whatever, that crime really is holding back certain aspects of economic progress? Because in theory, you invest in security and indirectly we'll get it paid back by a safer society that could continue on and push more business and open later and be safer and have a third shift. So now they employ, you know, 50% more people and so on.
We normally would. It all depends on how society look at crime. Murders, which is the top notch, and they are being, that's the one that a lot of countries check your society out in terms of murders. Mm-hmm. So if murders are down, it does not say that robberies are not down. Robberies home invasions, other type of crimes, I'm saying that when those type of, it's a balance. You will never get all of them down at the same time. Sometimes robberies turn into murders.
Right.
Because
we have a caller from Shogunus. I don't want to, sorry, but I don't want to keep the caller waiting too long. Caller, good morning, you on the air?
Good day, gentlemen.
Good day, good day.
Good day, sir.
I couldn't get here yesterday because I wanted to disagree with Karen when she said the hardest person to fire is a public servant.
Right.
In my experience, the opposite is true. If the people do their jobs, especially the politicians, the easiest people to fire for inappropriate behavior is public servants, because every public servant has a supervisor who's supposed to report on what he's doing. The thing about it is the regulations say you cannot fire or give an adverse report by surprise. If you see somebody doing something wrong, you have to bring it to their attention and give them the opportunity to rectify the position. And the problem with the politicians is don't do that. You remember this case with the property tax, right? They had local government reform. They say the regional authorities asked for the authorities to collect their property tax. Manon put up a committee who examined it, and they say, yes, that is the greatest thing. However, when the law went before Parliament, it did the opposite. Instead of giving the regional authority the power to collect tax, central government take away all the tax and they collect all. And I could go on forever on showing you where the public servants who do their work is the one who the politicians sit down and want to fire. Any questions, gentlemen?
Well, just that I will partially agree with you. I don't think it's at the fault of the politicians alone.
I never say politicians alone.
Yeah,
but
no.
It's their responsibility, and they are paid to do that.
Right, but I also think that there are certain aspects of the public service in the current time that also has caused what you know to be how it should be. It doesn't actually function that way because there are certain public servants who also don't do the proper job.
Yeah, because the politicians allow it.
In part, yes. In part, that is very true.
Not
it starts from the, yeah. No, well,
that is a job, that is oversight.
So what happens, Professor, is it starts with a politician, but then eventually some of these public servants with their tenure, at some point, they reach a stage where they've gone through multiple politicians.
Anywhere in the world you go, a person will do what they could get away with.
Yeah.
Well, I think that we look at...
And that is what the politicians do here in Trinidad.
No, well, ultimately, yes, you're right. Ultimately, you're right, because the buck stops, that's the top.
Yeah, but we look, do we really have public servants, or we have politically servant?
But that goes back to what he's saying.
Exactly. So yeah, I agreed. I agree with the professor in the way that he is putting it across. We lack effective management.
All I am saying is the easiest person to fire if they don't do their job is a public servant. That's all I say.
All right, Professor. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thank you. Well, and here's the thing. I actually think on principle, with regards to the actual, what it's supposed to be, he's probably right. It's just that
I don't think
we've allowed the situation to devolve.
Could we fire someone working in the private sector? Whose responsibility is that? Not the public service, right? State-run organization and public services fall under the ambit and the umbrella of the state. So it may appear to be the easiest person to fire, but this is the one that you are my employees.
No, you see, the problem is politically.
So, but
the whole dynamic of, well, we'll get rid of their people and put in our people. So politically, the practices kind of change because of the perceived to protect against that.
Right. So but then, I'm just simply saying and putting it across in this way: private citizens, right? Sorry, private corporations. They do get fired.
Yeah.
But they don't get the uproar when it comes to you don't get the uproar because I hire you, I can fire you.
Because we don't have private unions like that.
Exactly. But the public service is different with all the unions and the regulations and all that. But at the same time, they are
with all the political parties labeled as unions, so, right? That's kind of what I'm starting to look of it, right?
Plenty.
Some of them are not. Some of them are used. But we have two callers. We have Santa Cruz and NWD. Santa Cruz, morning. Caller, you on here?
Morning. Okay.
Morning.
It's a question I always wanted to ask the officer, right? And it always getting pushed away.
Retired
but I'm going to
officer.
ask you this morning. Concerning security, right? I'm talking about panorama, right? Why do we need all these police with these big guns among the public in the crowd? And most of the people that are there, especially on a final night, is old people. If you watch the thing, you'll see people who are in chair who walking with stick. And the police has a way where they come through the crowd, especially if you listen. Let me say like a crowd like All Stars. We just have the stick, everybody in front, All Stars, all that. And they come through, they don't ask excuse, They just push the way through and they go in. What is that about? Do we need that?
All right, so
do we need the police? Let me just finish and you'll come. Yeah.
You have any more? To say?
Do we need all this big gun all the time?
Right. So let me answer.
Okay, I'm going off here now.
No. I want you to remain for a few minutes.
Okay, right.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
That is not the police. That is not the police fault. And I'm saying it because that is a request by the organizers that this is the police that they want.
The presence.
Yes, they asked for specifically. So if you are not aware, Pan Trinbago do not ask for any officers. They want the crowd management officers or crowd control officers, these are the officers. I understand hold on, I understand what you are saying, how because of the nature of the crowd. But at the end of the day, we had to provide the services that they are requesting. These officers have a particular protocol to follow and a protocol to work in the manner in which they work. That is how they perform their duties. They may not be polite in the context of how you would say it, how you would expect. But believe you me, I have worked Panorama, and please, sir, don't work.
Okay.
I can tell you, I have been in that Panorama on the finals, and if you tell persons that you cannot come on stage with your band that you're supporting, they want, if you could give them the opportunity to go all the way on the stage, you will go all the way on the stage with it. It is highly impossible to keep using the word, sir, ma'am, move back. I will tell you with my experience. I know your experience.
I know this.
I know your experience.
But I'm not talking about on the stage. I'm talking about on the parade ground.
Well, that is where they request. That is where they request the persons
but
to
what
be.
I am saying, do they need these big guns that they have?
Sir, there is a procedure and a protocol that officers.
Yeah, but
this is how. This is.
I'm not saying.
No, I am saying to you this. These are how these officers perform duty. This is their tools, and this is what they are. They have. So you may want an officer without those type of things. We cannot send an officer out for duty who are trained and performing a particular duty in this manner with the type of equipment that he's supposed to work with. Because if an incident takes place, or should take place, and that officer, that team officer is not properly equipped, you would hear another side of the story as the police officers came here and they didn't come with the proper equipment to deal with the situation.
I think
so. It's
we need to wrap this up, but I'll just say this quick, caller. It's two issues that you're pointing out. The conduct of the officers, to some extent, is separate to the equipment and the amount. With regards to the and Ashraf's pointed to the conduct and why it is what it is, right? And I understand that. Anybody that's been to a FET or any kind of party in Trinidad understands that, right? You don't, half the time they can't hear you and they're not going to take you on if you just ask them to move. So you just move through them. The flip side is this. Overwhelming force at times is safer than just enough force. And it's not about the old people in the crowd. It's about potentially anybody else who might think, oh, Panorama is an easy target. Let's go do something in Panorama. And by having overwhelming force, you nip that idea in the bud well in advance. There are some times when you don't want the criminal element to even think about trying anything. So having overwhelming force basically does that.
I am not against the overwhelming force. Don't get me wrong. Huh? I am for that. But what I am saying, like, okay, a crowd in front the barn, right? Or dies down the road. You come along this side, they walk along this side, and then they come through in the middle, they're listening, and you go through. But I just say, like, why you need to? You was already walking on this side. Why you come now into the thing where everybody's listening? And the thing, what you doing is how you do what you do. Huh?
Yeah,
don't get me wrong, I don't think.
We have another caller, but
it was a riot thing and the battle and wherever it is.
We understand.
All right, I'm going up there. Okay.
Thank you, caller. Look, to some extent, that depends on the individual instance, so we can't really speak about why they made those decisions. I just know that to move through a crowd, we don't have the culture of being courteous, right? And I've seen that even on the ferry with little old ladies. They move the most brutal, most breathless ways, right? They don't even look you in the eye when they try to push past you, right? So much less, so the age of the patrons in Panorama, I'm not really looking at it as an indicator that they would be more willing to treat things lighter. Sorry, we have Dabby waiting for so long. I'm so sorry. Dabby, good morning. Caller, you on the air.
Yeah, pleasant morning. I'm forced to comment on the previous caller, and the ASP has said it very clear. And you have to actually experience it to really know how to deal with it. And coming through the center, you never know. Walking on this side, you wouldn't get the same reaction as to somebody with a firearm if you walk through the center. So therefore, it is a form of actually detecting crime and standard operating procedures. You know? But not everybody will understand that. Commenting on the visit yesterday, I work with one of the municipal corporations, and we were asked to do XYZ. In my estimation, the entire thing was not planned properly from beginning, and I hope that everything works well today. All the different activities and what was going on, and I could be wrong, but I don't believe that the right persons were asked to perform the duties, those who have the capacity to perform that duties and take charge of it. You understand? So not blaming anybody, but so far as incident-free. Might have been a bit of inconvenience, but it's a very serious thing, especially when it comes with diplomacy and protocol. Many of us who work in these exercises are somewhat ignorant, and I really hope that the rest of it goes well until the Prime Minister leaves. It's nice to have a dignitary of that level in the country, and at least he's safe. Thanks for the opportunity, guys. You'll have a nice day.
Thank you, caller. That's a good point that I didn't state, but I think it was kind of subconsciously a little bit in the back of my mind, not that I fully formed it. We have a major dignitary. Whether you agree with his politics or not, his policy decisions in his own country or not, it's an acknowledgement on a certain level, and it potentially could help bring bigger and better things to Trinidad, right? So, you know, I'm not saying it's the be-all and end-all, but this is not a small deal. So thanks, caller, for pointing that out, because I don't think I would have thought to point it out myself. We have Sanfran on the line. Good morning, caller. You on the air.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning, morning.
Mr. Ali.
Morning, sir.
You know, I heard you say, Mr. Ali, when you talk about what you saw on social media, what people were asking about Mr. Modi. And then this caller talking about the issue with police officers using big guns or crowd control. I want to say something to sum up everything. Trinidad and Tobago is an anti-watchword society. Anti-watchword society. Our watchwords are discipline, tolerance, and production. And I think we anti all of them things.
I like that
in the main. So that, I want to say that to the caller. Now, Sean, you're talking about what the minister talked about, this $360 million US reform
upgrade.
project?
Yeah.
Upgrade? Okay. Now, there's two things there. That 24-year project is not the same. It's what the 24-year project has been a reform of the public service coming out of that Gordon Draper report that Karen talked about on Wednesday about public sector reform from 1988, and all previous governments have been trying to reform the public sector. However, I think what the minister was referring to is the digital transformation that Hasselbachus has been trying to work on, and I think that 60 million is for that project, which is the 4-year project, which was in force for the last 4 years, what they were trying to do from 4 years ago. I think.
I think it said ended 26. Well, no, we're in 25, so maybe 3 years ago.
Yes. So that is the project, that digital transformation project, which got some fair resistance at the beginning, and I think it started to catch on. I hope that they continue with that and try to, because we really need to fully digitally transform our public sector in Trinidad and Tobago. But as I said, and I will say that morning Davide, what Davide said about Mr. Moody, India is, after China, I think they are the largest set of manufacturers in the world, and it is quite instructive that Mr. Moody is here and chose to come here, because Trinidad and Tobago, in terms of when you look at the diaspora, the Indian diaspora in this part of the world, is us and Guyana. And the reason why there's always been a good relationship with India, and I hope the Prime Minister could milk this for all that she could get. Have a good weekend, gentlemen.
Thank you, caller.
You know, what the caller was mentioning about the status quo of the Indian Prime Minister or India in the whole in terms of manufacturing. I listened to BBC reports, and this visit, they were highlighting the countries that Prime Minister Moody is visiting. And it's not because he just chose to visit. There was reasons behind choosing particular countries to visit. There are countries that in 30 years, in the last 30 years, nobody ever visited, and he chose to do it at this point in time. So there are reasons behind, and there's a lot of reason that they choose to visit certain countries and particular type of countries, not East Indian countries alone, with their African countries, because of trade and investment and other opportunities that both India and that country can present with each other. And I am hopeful that the visit would benefit us, because at the end of the day, it's not going to benefit one sector of or one race in Trinidad and Tobago. It's going to benefit Trinidad and Tobago. So we have to look at the bigger picture.
And this is also tied to BRICS, which I think people want to prop up as an economic bloc to be a bigger deal than it is, in part because one of India's greatest military security concerns is China. And we all saw that economic trade partnerships do not necessarily remove security concerns vis-a-vis Russia and Western Europe, right? Or Europe. Right? Well, no, Western Europe, because Russia, Moscow is Eastern Europe, right? Technically, right? They span 2 continents. So you can't just say, oh, well, okay, we'll trade, the whole thing should, no. BRICS as an entity, I'm not too sure politically how that works out. But what Moody might be looking to do is, because global trade is evolving, so right, he wants to engage now with countries that, you know, India might not have engaged to that degree, to try and find more trade partners, to try to find more diplomatic partners if necessary, maybe within BRICS, maybe separate and apart from BRICS, you know. Their military procurement is less based on Russian purchases from Russia, but yet they're still buying oil from Russia. So it's a complex thing. We, on the other hand, now, we might not be the same source of fossil fuels as we were in the past, but we're still a source, and we might be, on our infrastructure level, a gateway into other sources in our immediate vicinity.
As well as it might be an opportunity for human resource interchange and technology.
Oh, yes.
Right? So there's opportunities because technology is on the rise.
I think we underestimate the reputation we have internationally in the oil and gas sector, right? And to some extent, our education system has certain capacities in chemical engineering that could be revamped or reutilized once again, right? Meanwhile, of course, we could be a market for certain things from India, as Mr. Sanz Fernando pointed out. The only thing is we need to figure out our exports for balance of trade. We can't just switch, now we importing a whole set of stuff from India we can't pay for. But there could still be a source of things that we need because we have to import a lot of what we need. Now, a couple of things what the callers mentioned. I think the thing that Dominic Smith, Minister of Public Administration, pointed out, or at least what I gathered too, is you're going to spend 60 million US on something. What? How? When? What are the details? It's kind of similar to the THA story I mentioned earlier, the lack of transparency. Let us know what's going on, right? In part, and this is what blows my mind, if you're a government and you're going to spend 60 million US, to some extent, isn't that like assuming that it's done well for a good cause? That's something that you could get a photo opportunity and a press conference out of, not so? You could get good press out of this. You could get good mileage out of this. I don't understand how they try to get good mileage out of the Dragon Field when that was politically dead internationally, not anything to do with us. But you have a digital transformation project and you're not giving us the details of it. I don't know why it has to be secretive. Is it that you're not confident in your own plans? But that's a whole other thing. This is interesting. So people wondered why we have the security for Moody, and one of the callers called it, why we have the security for Panorama. Don't we have a crime situation, or have we forgotten it already? We had a crime situation where the public was like, there's too much crime.
Well, apparently it's not front burner anymore. I don't know.
But listen, I'll bet you money, if this was 6 months ago at the height, or a year ago at the height of the murder rate, we would have had some of the same comments from elements of the public. It's almost like if they don't understand, security is not like in separate convenient silos where
security for persons who don't understand what security presents. Security or proper security limits your freedom.
Security is always a compromise with freedom.
Right?
Right, yes, there's a back and forth.
There's a compromise. So
yes.
If you want proper security.
Yes.
It's costly, but if you want proper security, you have to accept that you're going to have limited freedoms and ability to do certain things.
Because when I speak about certain Southeast Asian countries, what are the kind of penalties if you break the law there? That's all I'm asking.
So those type of so when you look at how crime in those areas are very low, it's because of the security apparatus as well as, and when I say security apparatus, I'm speaking together with the judicial and the penalization of
justice system.
The justice system, everything working together. So I just lump that in the whole time. So when you sacrifice, because you have to sacrifice, so there's a sacrifice you are making.
Basically, freedoms to
so
some extent.
Give up some of your freedom.
You give up some of your.
So you give up your freedom to the state to live as comfortable as you feel, because that is what you're saying.
Because some people like it that way. Now, let's go what Mr. Sanz Fernando said. We are anti-discipline, tolerance, and production. You think that could work in this laissez-faire society? That, Trinity time is a thing?
Well, it's true. I think he hit the nail on the head exactly when we say we anti, because we always keep on talking about these type of what our watchwords are. But are we living our watchwords? No. Right? Discipline going through discipline has gone bolted.
I almost got hit yesterday morning. I didn't say it on air, but someone just wasn't looking and didn't realize I'm next to him the whole time.
And when you try to instill a level of, or reinstill, sorry, not instill anymore, reinstill a level of discipline on society from the homes all the way back to society, there's always a kickback and saying that we are too harsh.
To be fair, the demerit point system could be an example of that. You know, it's a harsh penalty in a way, indirectly, that's your freedoms are reduced.
But
your rights are reduced.
But we always we always have an issue with how we do it. No,
because they say it's too harsh.
So I will agree with the caller. It's not how you are or what you do, is how you do it, right? So yes, you can have a presence of security, you could have a high presence of security, you could even have stringent laws, but are we enforcing them in the manner which is supposed to be enforced? I know you made a question, you talk about a question on your thing, your review, but I think we will leave that one for next, because I wanted to get in conversation with that thing called terrorism, but we will talk about that next.
But we already had this conversation, you know, when Gary was talking about it.
No, but when you talk about this Venezuelan entity now being classified as terrorist,
I don't fully disagree with it, but I don't fully agree with it either.
That organization is a terrorist organization from that perspective, right?
Yeah.
We have groups here who are gangs, and I always say that we don't have gangs. We have group of individuals or group of criminals.
Right.
They're not gangs.
Okay.
If you
like what America knows gangs to be.
Those are gangs because they are coordinated, organized, and they are willing to say that they are members of gangs.
So what you're saying is we so anti-discipline, tolerance, and production.
Even the gangs are.
We can't even organize crime.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, to borrow a joke from a better comedian
right.
than I, because I'm not a comedian.
Because
sorry, we have to close it. We have to leave that there, right?
There.
I'll just say this: anti-discipline. How many people speed still? I'm just saying, right? You could pull all the examples on day-to-day life so easy. It's low-hanging fruit.
But before we go, on a very positive note,
very quickly,
I hope you miss it. To all those children who wrote SEA exams, I hope they had success. And for the parents, if the children are not as successful as you believe, still give them the support, because they have gone through a lot, and be proud of them.
Yeah. I'll have a little thing from the Ministry of Education maybe next week, just to give some advice for those who didn't see it yet, that came up before. But that said, we have to go, so I want to thank Ashraf for joining me and having such an expansive conversation on the topic. I want to thank all the callers for calling in. We appreciate all the points. Even caller about Panorama, I know we disagree with you, but thank you for the question, because it allowed a very good conversation to happen. This is talking about the WSND content capital. Just want to remind everybody, want to make sure I don't have a comment that I didn't see. Want to remind everybody to have a good weekend, right? Do your best, put your best foot forward when you interact with other people. So remember, it's always nice to be nice. Don't commit one of those acts of road rage. Even if it's not physical violence, verbal altercations, let's try to show a little bit more discipline. Stay safe. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other, so that we could see each other next week. Bye-bye.
WESN.
My name is Dr. Stephen Carroll, the CEO at Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist, and we are committed to making good private healthcare affordable.
For all your medical needs, including dental, radiology, laparoscopy, behavioral and mental health, along with many other services, contact us for more information at 235-5479.
Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Low energy? Heart concerns? Migraines slowing you down? It's time to take control of your health. Join Wellness Unlocked, the series that brings expert advice and real solutions for a healthier you. In our latest episode, learn how Jameson CoQ10 can help support heart health, boost energy, and even reduce migraines. Get the science, the stories, and the steps to power up your health with CoQ10. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and start your wellness journey today.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore Color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.